What if the most stylish game on Nintendo Switch 2 isn't the biggest blockbuster, but a black and white cartoon where you play as a private detective blasting gangsters with an arsenal of outrageous weapons? I know, it sounds completely ridiculous, but after spending time with Mouse, PI for Hire, I can honestly say this is one of the most creative games I've played in quite a while. Welcome back to Smash and Play. Today, we're diving into a game that mixes first person shooting, classic film noir, and the unforgettable charm of 1930s animation. The big question is, does this unique combination actually work? From the very beginning, Mouse, PI for Hire wastes no time pulling you into its world. You arrive in Mouseburg, an alternate version of 1930s New York, populated entirely by mice, rats, shrews, and other cartoon creatures. The city is filled with smoky alleyways, suspicious characters, and plenty of secrets waiting to be uncovered. You step into the shoes of Jack Pepper, a former police officer turned private investigator who's asked to solve the disappearance of a famous magician named Steve Bandel. At first, it feels like the perfect setup for a classic detective adventure. There are mysterious conversations, unexpected twists, shady organizations, and enough red herrings to keep you guessing. But here's something important you should know before jumping in. Despite the detective theme, this isn't really a detective game. It's an action shooter wearing a detective's trench coat. And honestly, I don't necessarily mean that as a criticism. The investigation mainly serves as the reason you're moving from one mission to the next. You'll collect clues, visit your detective board, and speak with various NPCs. But the game rarely asks you to solve puzzles or figure things out on your own. Most objectives are clearly explained, and the mystery unfolds through the story rather than through player deduction. I'll admit, I was hoping for a little more detective work. Imagine questioning suspects, examining crime scenes more closely, or making choices that actually influence the investigation. Those ideas could have elevated the experience even further. Still, once the shooting starts, it's easy to understand why the developers leaned in this direction. The gameplay is fast, responsive, and surprisingly addictive. Most levels follow a fairly linear structure, but they're constantly introducing new environments, platforming sections, and enemy encounters to keep things moving. One moment you're exploring abandoned buildings searching for clues. The next, you're sprinting across rooftops while exchanging gunfire with cartoon gangsters. It creates a nice rhythm that rarely lets the pace slow down. Movement is another pleasant surprise. This isn't one of those shooters where you spend the entire game hiding behind cover. You're constantly jumping, climbing, and navigating vertical environments. As you unlock new abilities like the double jump, exploration becomes even more enjoyable because you start noticing paths and secrets that were previously out of reach. That sense of progression feels rewarding without becoming overly complicated. Boss battles also deserve some praise. Instead of simply throwing larger groups of enemies at you, each boss introduces its own mechanics and attack patterns. They're not incredibly difficult, but they do a good job breaking up the regular combat and giving you memorable moments throughout the campaign. Now, as much as I enjoyed the action, the gameplay isn't perfect. After several hours, I started noticing that many encounters felt a little too familiar. You'll often find yourself fighting similar enemy groups using similar strategies. New weapons certainly help keep combat entertaining, but the overall gameplay loop doesn't evolve quite as much as I would have liked. It's still fun, it just starts feeling a little repetitive during the later chapters. Another issue is weapon switching. Instead of instantly cycling between weapons, you need to hold a button to open a weapon wheel before selecting what you want. It works, but during hectic firefights, it interrupts the flow just enough to become noticeable. It's one of those little design choices that doesn't ruin the experience, but it also doesn't feel as smooth as it could have been. Speaking of controls, this is probably my biggest complaint with the Nintendo Switch 2 version. There's no gyro aiming. Honestly, that's a missed opportunity. Gyro controls have become one of the best ways to play shooters on Nintendo systems because they make small aiming adjustments so much easier. Their absence here feels especially noticeable considering how fast paced some of the combat becomes. There is a mouse control option, which sounds like an interesting idea on paper, but I personally never found it comfortable enough to replace the standard analog controls. After experimenting with both, I quickly went back to using the sticks. Thankfully, the controls remain responsive enough that these issues never become major frustrations. Now let's talk about the reason most people will probably buy this game in the first place: the presentation. Honestly, it's incredible. Every single frame looks like it came directly from a genuine cartoon produced in the early 1930s. The developers didn't simply copy the art style, they committed to it completely. Characters move using exaggerated rubber hose animation. Film grain constantly gives the screen an authentic vintage appearance. Even the way enemies react when they're defeated feels like something pulled straight out of a classic animated short. Sometimes enemies melt, sometimes they dissolve, sometimes they explode into exaggerated cartoon effects. And it never stops being entertaining. What impressed me most is the attention to detail. Throughout the adventure, you'll notice countless references to classic animation and pop culture from that era. Fans of vintage cartoons will probably spend just as much time appreciating the visual design as they do actually playing the game. It's not trying to be realistic, it's trying to be authentic. And it absolutely succeeds. Performance is generally solid too. The game offers both a quality mode, locked at 30 frames per second, and a performance mode targeting 60 frames per second. I spent almost my entire playthrough using performance mode because shooters simply feel better with smoother frame rates. For the most part, it delivers exactly that. During larger battles, you'll occasionally notice some frame rate drops, especially when the screen becomes filled with enemies and visual effects, but they're relatively minor and never seriously affected my enjoyment. Audio is another area where Mouse, PI for Hire, really shines. Troy Baker delivers an excellent performance as Jack Pepper, perfectly capturing that classic hard boiled detective personality. His voice fits the world so naturally that after only a few minutes, it's difficult to imagine anyone else playing the role. The supporting cast is also strong overall, helping make Mouseburg feel like a believable city full of colorful personalities. And then there's the soundtrack. If you enjoy jazz, you're going to feel right at home. Smooth saxophones and moody instrumentals accompany nearly every investigation and action sequence, reinforcing the film noir atmosphere from beginning to end. There are a handful of moments where the music cuts out somewhat abruptly, briefly interrupting the mood, but fortunately, those moments are fairly rare. One area where I think the game offers excellent value is its length. Depending on how much optional content you complete, you're looking at roughly 10 to 15 hours of gameplay. Between side missions, hidden newspapers, collectible baseball cards, and replaying sections to discover everything, there's enough content here to justify its price. It's not overly long, it doesn't drag, and honestly, sometimes that's exactly what a game needs. So, is Mouse PI for hire perfect? No. The detective mechanics could have gone much deeper. Combat becomes repetitive in places. The weapon wheel isn't ideal. And I still can't understand why gyro aiming wasn't included. But here's the thing, every time I considered putting the controller down, I wanted to see one more level, one more boss, one more beautifully animated environment. Because despite its flaws, Mouse, PI for Hire has something that many modern games struggle to achieve: personality. Every location feels handcrafted. Every character has charm. Every mission reflects the developer's love for classic animation and film noir. And that's something you simply can't fake. So, is it worth buying? For me, the answer is yes. Buy. Just don't expect a deep detective simulator. Instead, expect a stylish, entertaining first person shooter wrapped inside one of the most original visual presentations available on Nintendo Switch 2. My final rating is 8. 6 out of 10. Mouse, PI for Hire doesn't completely reinvent the first person shooter genre, but it proves that creativity, atmosphere, and artistic passion can make a game unforgettable. It's a wonderful tribute to classic animation, a solid action game in its own right, and one of the most distinctive experiences currently available on Nintendo Switch 2. Thanks for watching Smash and Play. If you've already played Mouse, PI for Hire, let me know what you thought in the comments. Did the incredible art style live up to your expectations? Or were you hoping for deeper detective gameplay? If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Smash and Play for more honest reviews, gameplay impressions, and Nintendo Switch 2 coverage.